The reason this state is so terrific is based on the work of millions of people over a really long period of time. Working people built this state. Working people make this state run. The idea that you can come here from all over the world, which we want people to do, to create the future, to build the businesses of the future. We want that. That's great for California. But you don't come here to rip us off.
Hey, everyone, from KQED in San Francisco, this is Political Breakdown. I'm Marisa Lagos.
And I'm Scott Shafer. Today on The Breakdown, we continue our series of interviews with the many candidates vying to be California's next governor. Today, Tom Steyer, the billionaire and former hedge fund manager turned Democratic Party activist.
Steyer, who has lived in San Francisco for decades, made his fortune at Fairlawn Capital, where he was known for taking big risks in volatile markets. Bets that largely paid off. He left the firm in 2012 and has spent his time and money championing progressive causes. Tom Steyer, welcome back to Political Breakdown. It's been a minute.
Good morning. Nice to see you guys.
Great to see you. So we're opening these interviews of all these candidates with the same question, which is, who are you politically? What is your vision for this state?
Well, California is a dream for everybody here. And the issue that people have is that they can't afford to live here. And so to a very large extent, we have a state that is incredibly successful on average, but where so many people are struggling. And so to me, I love being here, and I know everybody wants to be in California because it is such an amazing place. But the way that people are living and the way that income is being distributed, leaves so many people at risk. And so to me, that is the issue in California is about how can people afford to stay in California.
Yeah. And we're going to come back and dig into a lot of those issues. But we want to go back to when you were a kid. You were born in New York City. Your mom was a teacher. I think at one point she was teaching inside of a jail. Your dad was a corporate lawyer. He worked for the firm representing Exxon. He was a prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. What kind of childhood did you have?
I had an incredibly fun childhood, if you want to know the truth. I'm from a family of 3 boys. The rule was every single day you have to leave the house. You have to go out to the park and play. So I had 2 older brothers, and we went to school and we played in the park, and my parents were very strict about no TV. And so, I had a very rambunctious, very fun, very physical upbringing.
Were politics part of the conversations, like over the dinner table? Were your parents engaged?
My father was very quiet, and my mother was very talkative. And so she was the person, I grew up at a time during the Civil Rights Revolution and during Vietnam. And my mother was a extreme progressive, and she voted for Shirley Chisholm, and she was an absolute diehard civil rights person. Which is why when she was a teacher, and the reason she ended up teaching in prison, she was teaching in intentionally the most difficult public schools in New York City because that's where she wanted to be with those kids. So she was a huge believer in the Civil Rights Revolution, and she was a fierce opponent of the Vietnam War. And so that that is
those were the dinner table conversations.
And my mom, who I absolutely, you can tell, adored, was somebody who was your best friend and you're a tough person.
And she was Episcopalian. Your dad was Jewish but not practicing. So, how did religion figure into your childhood?
We said prayers every night. We said the Lord's Prayer every night. I think we all believed in God. I still believe in God.
You think of yourself as Episcopalian or like?
Go to church. And I think, my opinion about it is everybody reaches that kind of eternal idea on their own. And there's, this is what we've learned is this is a huge world. And whatever way you can get to a place where your values are really good, I'm behind. Because obviously nobody has, a monopoly on wisdom. No one has a monopoly on virtue. But I think everybody should be seeking for that, and I try to seek for that.
That's so interesting. So you ended up going to Yale. I know you were captain of the soccer team there. And I read that your first investment was in an agricultural equipment manufacturer companies after you spent a summer on a cattle ranch. Explain, how did that all come to be? And, was that your kind of first taste of the finance world?
Or horses?
Both.
So I worked as a cowboy. And I had an amazingly fun summer. And it was so hard Scrabble. It was hand to mouth. I got paid $100 a month. I worked 6 days a week from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. and I milked the cows before breakfast and after dinner. So I was not well paid. But I came home and I said to my father, all the money goes to the farm equipment people. I want to buy shares in all the farm equipment
So is that what
companies.
you did with that summer's money?
I didn't have any money. I got paid $100 a month, and I spent $100 a month, not $99.99. That's what it took. I went to the movies. So it was an amazing, fun summer. I loved it. I lived on a horse. I am reasonably capable of all the ranch stuff. But I didn't, no one told me to invest. I was just like, naturally felt like, oh my God, all the money in this whole system goes to the equipment manufacturers. They're making a fortune.
That's so interesting.
You briefly worked in finance before moving to California. You went to Stanford Business School, and you went back to New York. You came back here. So what brought you back out west?
So, first of all, I'm married to somebody from California.
40 years, right?
Yes.
40 years this year.
Yes. But I think also we went hiking in New Mexico, and we looked at each other and we said, we're living west of the Mississippi, no question. And it's just a question of where. And then we thought about it, and we thought we have a ton of friends in the Bay Area because we both went to Stanford grad school, and her family lived in they're both dead, but they both her parents lived in the Bay Area. And we felt like, okay, I'm going to start a business. I can choose where I want to start it. Yeah. And let's go to the place where your family lives and where we all have a ton of friends from going to grad school there.
So you started Fairlawn Capital, which is named for the Fairlawn Islands, I believe, off
Yes,
of San
of course.
Francisco. What was your vision at the time? Like, what did you think that the firm would do? What did you want it to do?
Basically, what I thought we could do was invest in a way to avoid, this is going to sound incredibly boring, so I'll apologize, to avoid losses. That basically we would invest in things that we were very confident about so that we could compound. You know, I used to say to people, compounding's magic. If you could take the $28 that they bought New York Island for in whatever it was, 1648, and compound it like an 8 or a 9, you could buy all of New York with all of the buildings today. Compounding is magic. And what I was saying is, let's just compound. Let's do things that we're highly confident of. And if we can compound successfully and not lose money, then we're going to compound at a great rate and make a lot of money.
That's very risk averse, but that was not your strategy all along. In fact, in 1997, the Thai baht crisis, there was severe turbulence in the Asian financial markets, and you swam against the grain. Most hedge funds were shorting the currency. What did you do at Fairlawn?
Look, what we did was we went over there to buy assets that we thought were durable and valuable at a price where everybody was fleeing. And so actually it was exactly what I was doing. It seemed risky, but the risk had already gone out. So to a very large extent, what we were saying was, let's go to places where we can buy things that are safe.
Like farm equipment?
I think what we bought was the biggest bank in Indonesia.
Oh, wow.
But what I used to say to people is the first rule of investing is don't lose money. And the second rule of investing is don't forget the first rule. If you can keep compounding. So everyone was fleeing, as you said. It's extremely scary, as you said, and that means prices are really low. So you've actually taken the risk out of the investment.
Yeah.
People are rushing out. You rushed in.
Yeah. I mean, you know as well as anybody that you've gotten flack in recent years for some of the investments that were made at the time in coal, oil, private prisons. I wonder, like, what you were thinking at the time about the sort of morality of investments. Were you, how do you sort of square that with where you are now politically?
Absolutely, I was, and that's why I left Fairlawn.
But at the time, I mean,
so
before
let me say,
that,
well, let's talk about it. So the one that people talk about is private prisons, which we owned more than 20 years ago. We sold more than 20 years ago because we decided it was the wrong thing to do.
At a time when the politics, admittedly, were very different around prisons.
But we decided on our own, this is something we don't want to do, not because it was a bad investment. It was less than, I don't know, 1% of what we were doing, way less. Like in the context of that investment firm, it was tiny. But I decided on my own, I don't want to do this. This is not something I approve of. So we're going to sell it. It's not a question of whether it's a good investment or a bad investment from a money standpoint. It's just not something we want to do. And, I really started to get involved in climate, to be aware of it, at the second half of the 2000s after a trip to Alaska with my family. And I was like, oh my God, this whole state is melting. And so I became more and more involved in the idea of how are we going to transition away from fossil fuels. So, do I think that I wish I'd been faster to figure that out? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But did I figure that out before there were any of the environmental groups? Yes, I did. And so there was a.
Although Al Gore was talking about that, right?
Yes, he was. And there was an awareness of it. But what really happened was look, there's an awareness of a lot of things. I went up to Alaska and saw the whole state was melting.
Was there an aha moment for you? Because I think at one point, Yale students targeted your firm, Farallon Investments. I mean, what was it that, when did the light bulb go off, or was it then in Alaska?
In terms of climate, it was Alaska, no question, because we all went up there. I wanted to show my family what the world looked like before Europeans came to North America. And what we saw was it's just melting. I worked in Alaska for a summer because I wanted to see the outdoors and I wanted to travel it. And we were all like, oh my God, this is so overwhelmingly obvious. Let's go home and see if we can do something about it. And so it was a transition from that trip. It wasn't like I said, okay, I'm going to change my life today. I said, oh, this is something we can address. Let's start addressing it. And then it just got progressively more serious in terms of what I did.
Well, as you well know, this is a crowded field. And you've never held elected office, as we've just gone through. You have spent the better part of really the past 2 decades working in politics, funding state and national campaigns. What's your case for why you would be better equipped to lead this state than, say, a member of Congress? Just to throw that out as an example.
Well, I think, as you said, I left my business something like 14 years ago, and I've spent the last 14 some odd years working basically around political issues and pushing as a private citizen to get things done, I ran 3 statewide propositions, all of them taking on funded interests, taking on the oil companies, taking on the tobacco companies, taking on out-of-state companies, to pass propositions that the people couldn't get done in Sacramento. And, I feel as if for the last, whatever that is, 14 years, I have been working in the public interest in a variety of ways as a full-time job.
In some ways, though, what you just described is kind of top down. You are the decision maker. If you become governor, you're going to have to work with the legislature. You have to compromise. Is that something you feel comes naturally to you, like giving and taking and, not getting your way?
Well, I was talking about propositions, to be fair, but we also have 20 people in Sacramento working on issues on a day-to-day basis. So the idea
But still, they work for you.
They do, but they work within what you're saying is, Tom, you're
system.
working within the context of a political system. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 10 years, working within the context of a political system. If I win the governor's race, actually, they'll be working for me too. But the truth is, I will always be having to partner with people. I will always be having to convince people, listen to people, and build consensus. And if you actually look at what we've done through that group, Next Gen Policy, which has been run by the same guy for the last 10 years, and we have an extraordinary staff of 20 people. We have been involved in so many of the things in California. And so that is do I think that this is part of building consensus, knowing people and working together? Yes. And have we been doing that for the last 10 years, in my mind, extraordinarily successfully? Yes.
Yeah. One of the big sort of parts of your campaign, as you laid out at the beginning, is this idea of affordability. And one thing you've been talking about a lot is energy. You say break up the utility monopolies and lower electric bills by 25%. I've been covering PG&E since I moved to San Francisco over 20 years ago. Our investor and utility structure is incredibly complicated, very dependent on Wall Street. I guess just first lay out, what does that mean? What do you mean break up the monopolies? How would you lower these bills?
So there are 2 things going on there. And let's be clear. We pay an amazingly high price for our electricity in this state. About twice the national average, to be honest. And they're monopolies. It's illegal to go around them. So they're stuck in place. I've said we'd reduce it by a quarter, which would get us to being only 50% more expensive than the rest of the country. So when I think about it, how is that going to work? There are two things I've said that we do. First of all, I don't know how many of your viewers are aware of how the electric companies make their money, but basically it's not by charging money, having costs, and getting the difference.
It's by building, basically.
It's actually by getting things into the rate base and getting a guaranteed return on that. And as a result, we've ended up with, they're doing their job of trying to get as many things into that rate base as possible. And as a result, at a time when the cost of energy is going down at a dramatic rate around the world, our rates are doing nothing but go up. And so what I've said I will do, one of the things that I'm going to do is try to change the way we oversee the existing utilities, because in fact, what we're doing is incenting to get things to be approved so they can get a return on it. And that's why we've ended up with such high prices. And the second thing I've tried to say is we're going to try and introduce competition at a local level so that people can actually produce electricity. And let me give you some numbers so that you guys can get a sense of what's going on here. I'm going to talk, these numbers make sense if you understand per kilowatt hour, which nobody does, but that's okay because they're just numbers and you can get the difference. It costs between 1 and 2 cents per kilowatt hour to create solar energy and a little bit more for wind energy. It costs a couple of cents per hour for storage. We pay the retail rate for electricity in PG&E's territory is 48 cents.
Which is distribution, right? I mean, that's what we're paying for.
Yeah, but let me say, I understand that point, but my point is, does that seem a little high? Because the rest of the country is paying half as much as us. There's something going on here, and there's no ability to compete. And every monopoly in the world will explain to you this is the only way it can work, there's no choice, blah, blah, blah. But every monopoly in the world is not telling the truth, including this one.
But they also have a lot of lawyers, a lot of lobbyists. They probably like things just the way they are. And so wouldn't anything you're trying to do up there be mired in lawsuits and challenges and so on? And also at the end of the 1990s, there was deregulation and it led to blackouts. And, that was, of course, Enron fooling around with our energy markets. But, it's complicated. And it seems like it would be hard to deliver on your promise of 25% rate cuts.
I completely disagree. At 25% rate cuts, we're paying 50% more than the national average at a time when the actual cost of electricity is plummeting. The cost of electricity has gone down. Think about what I just said to you.
Is it lowering their rate of guaranteed return? I mean, you've talked about expanding.
There is a system in place that is, look, I'm not mad at these people. They've been given a box of how to make money, and they're playing that box. And that box is not good for the people of California because we're paying way too much for electricity.
Can I ask you this? Do you think utilities should be investor-owned? Should they be traded on Wall Street?
I'm happy to have investor-owned. My issue is we are not regulating them right, and we're not allowing people to compete with them. And if you have, the history of monopoly, the rule of a monopoly is we charge as much as we can and we deliver the worst service we can. That's the rule. And you know what? That's what we're getting. So when people say this is the only, and monopolies always tell you the same thing, this is the only thing that can possibly work.
Yeah.
That's not true. That's absolutely not true. So what I'm saying is we're going to have a different rule at the Public Utilities Commission about how they get paid, and we're going to introduce local competition. Because the truth is, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but actually there's a gigantic electric revolution going on in the world. And they're saying we need to keep charging you the rates based on the 20th century. It's like, no, you don't. And we had this terrible experience as a state when we tried to deregulate and the people didn't know what they were doing. And as a result, there were all these failures because they misdiagnosed it. And so as a result, people are now very scared to touch this because it's like, we're scared to have another political disaster. I'm not scared because I've spent decades looking at this system. I'm not scared. The truth is the tech is here to do this at a fraction of the cost. And these guys are saying, you can't do that to us. We need to make our money. And my answer is, no, the people of California come first. We're going to make sure that the people of California get served with an electricity revolution that is sweeping the whole world. And they're saying, except for us. Nope. Not doing that.
We could spend all day on energy, but we do want to move on to some other issues.
Well, nobody can be mad at me for dropping their electric rates, got started, and it is very doable. And every monopoly in the world will say this is the only way it can ever work, and that's not true.
All right. Well, I want to talk about taxes. We are in a moment where not only is the state facing ongoing structural deficits, but obviously huge attacks on funding from the Trump administration. First, talk about where you stand on this very controversial proposal by SEIU UHW to impose a one-time 5% tax on folks with wealth above $1 billion.
So let me start by saying, should we be taxing the richest people in the state more? Hell yes. So theoretically, this tax makes sense. I have real issues with the way it works specifically. So for instance, it's a one-time tax for a long-term problem. It distributes the money very specifically to the people who are, 90% to the people who are proposing the tax. Mm-hmm. That is not the way that California distributes money.
Which is a union.
Yeah, healthcare
workers, yeah.
Yeah, but my point is, if this were the only thing in the world, does it address a real problem, a real shortfall of money? Yes. But I'm saying it's not the only thing we can do. I am proposing closing a corporate real estate tax loophole that's existed for over 40 years that brings in more money to the state, that is permanent, that is completely fair. And as a first step, that's what I'm saying. I'll call a special election to pass that because we do need the money. We are at a structural deficit and it's necessary for us to respond. But I want to do it in a way, it's kind of, I agree with that idea theoretically. But it's really important long-term that you get the details right.
Yeah.
That you actually do the work at the ground level to get it right.
So are you saying you would oppose this if it makes the ballot, the tax, the billionaire?
I didn't say that. What I said was if it were the only thing we could do to solve this problem, I'd be for it.
But you're saying there are other things that you could do.
I think that we're going to be able to solve this problem in better ways. And I'm proposing one of them, and I've proposed another. I've also proposed, I came out with an AI plan that involves taxing every AI transaction at a very, very low rate, but that is a way for us to get the state to have an interest in what is being created in this state to change the world in which they're using this state to do it.
I mean, there's a national proposal by Bernie Sanders. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, but for a 5% annual national tax on billionaires, I wonder why, would you support that? But also, why focus on corporations versus individuals? What is the thinking there?
Well, let me say this. I want this state to continue to be what it has been, which has been a place where people come to start new ideas, to create the future, to build the businesses of the future. And that's what we've been doing. And it seems to me that is the critical thing to get right. And so when everybody's focused on the ownership, I just said to you, I believe that the richest people in this state should be paying more. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But to me, the critical thing is to make sure that we have a great place for businesses to come to be invented and that they pay a fair share. Because let's face it, the reason this state is so terrific is based on the work of millions of people over a really long period of time. Working people built this state. Working people make this state run. The idea that you can come here from all over the world, which we want people to do, to create the future, to build the businesses of the future, we want that. That's great for California. But you don't come here to rip us off. This is an ecosystem that working people have built over a long period of time that they continue to build. And it's like, you come here, you're part of this ecosystem. Knock it out of the park. But you're going to pay your fair share. You're going to be part of this state. We're doing something extraordinary. We're trying to show the world what the 21st century is supposed to look like. Don't come here and think you're going to rip us off and sneer at us. Not going to happen.
Well, speaking of working people, unions, of course, are one of the most, if not the most powerful interest group in Democratic Party politics in the state of California. And for that reason, it's very hard for Democrats in office to say no to unions, oftentimes. And sometimes we've seen contracts that are agreed to and passed and enacted only to see very shortly thereafter they're not affordable and people get laid off or schools close or whatever it might be. Do you feel like you would stand up to unions when necessary? Do you feel like in some ways the state has been too generous? Are there specific cases where you think this, we've kind of given away the bank?
Well, let me say this. The number one issue in California, I said to you, is that Californians can't afford to live here. I basically feel like for the last 40 to 45 years, working Californians have gotten the short end of the stick. So I am very much in the position of wanting to work with working people, very much in the position of wanting to work with organized labor and unions in particular to say, let's get this to a place that's fair, where people can afford to live here. But let me say this too. What I've said to everybody is, we're going to agree on the vision. We're going to agree on where we're going. We may argue about the details along the way because it's really important that we get the details right. But along the way, what we're seeing here is, honestly, working people are really struggling in the richest state, in the richest country, in the history of the world. And what I'm talking about is what I call shared prosperity. Look, I'm a business person. I was a business person very successfully for a long time. I want this state to crush it. I want us to invent the future. I want all the great companies of the world to feel like this is the place that they need to be. I want to make that possible for them, and I want everybody to go along. I don't want to leave people by the side of the road. I want to deliver the services people need, and I want people to be paid fairly. So in answer to your question, I believe organized labor is a critical part of this state in terms of representing working people. And I think, are we going to agree on everything? No. But what we're going to agree on is where we're trying to get to, and we're going to argue the way everybody argues along the way to make sure that we get there in the best way.
Yeah. Only a few minutes left, but one of the areas we're really seeing labor flex its power is around schools. We just had a school strike here in San Francisco. You said that California schools are starved of funding. I've heard other people in this race say that's not the issue. We fund schools well, and we're still, below national averages in achievement. Why do you see resources as the problem, and how do you think we could really fundamentally change this education system with more?
Well, let's talk about that, because there is a sense among a lot of people in California, and some of the people running for governor want to make this true. If you look at a cost-adjusted basis per pupil, California is 31st out of 50 states. So when we say we spend so much on a cost-adjusted basis, we don't. And so when we're saying, per pupil, that's, why are people not doing well? And it's like, we're spending all this money. It's like, actually, on a cost-adjusted basis, we're not spending all this money.
Right, when you look at
and
how
so
much
am
it costs,
I, the first thing we have to do is actually supply the schools with enough money. That is absolutely. Now, the second thing I said is, look, over 90% of the kids in California go to public schools. We are working through the public schools. We are working with the public schools teachers. They run the classrooms. The idea that we're going around them, that's not true. They run the classrooms. It's really critical that we work on this together and come to the right decision together.
Well, speaking of kids, you got 4 of them. They're grown. I'm wondering, how do they feel about Dad being on TV all the time, running for governor? And I'm also curious, have they adopted all of your values in terms of what they're doing with their lives?
So do they like the fact that I'm in the public eye? I don't know, but I honestly believe we have an incredibly close family. And I believe that they think that I am doing what I think is right and trying to do the right thing, and they want me very much to do that, and I want that for them. And so when I look at what they're doing with their lot, we have only 2 rules. Work hard, be nice. Those are the 2 rules, and they're absolute rules. And if you look at what my kids are doing, what the jobs they're having, how hard they're working, what kind of people they are, how they participate, I am incredibly proud of my wife and 4 kids. Incredibly proud. And I hope they're proud of me, and I know they're rooting for me. So, do some of them think differently about some things than I do? I'd be ashamed if they didn't. But the truth is, they are all, in my mind, trying to be as objective as a loving father could possibly be, incredibly productive, incredibly positive members of society who really care about this state and are doing jobs that they think, my oldest son is an AI researcher. My second son is an architect who really works from nature. My daughter, I have 3 sons and a daughter. My daughter is an investor in early stage food and ag from a climate standpoint. And my 4th child, who's a boy, is a doctor who wants to be a cardiologist for kids. He's a 3rd-year resident down in Los Angeles. So every one of those people in my mind is doing an amazing, positive job for society. That is a hell of a lot of work, and they're trying their asses off to be good members of society, I'm super, super, super proud. My kids and my wife, Kat, works her ass off trying to be an advocate for economic and environmental justice.
Yeah. All right, before we let you go, we've asked all the candidates this one question, which is, where would you take somebody from out of state to give them like a flavor, a taste of California? I'm guessing it'd be outdoors, given...
Oh, it's 100% outdoors. I didn't even realize there was a chance it wouldn't be.
14,000 up, probably.
I mean, look, I've been trying to climb the 14ers, but, it's kind of like, would you take them to Yosemite or would you take them to Tahoe?
An embarrassment of riches,
Would you take them to Stinson or would you take them to Big Sur? Would you take them down to San Diego? I mean, I love the Pacific Ocean. I love the mountains. This is the most beautiful state. Everyone says, where are you going for vacation? I'm like, why would I be going someplace else but here? You may go someplace else to learn cultural things, but this is the most beautiful state. Look, if someone were coming to see me, the truth of where we'd probably go, honest to God, is Stinson, because it's the closest. But we live on the ocean. I adore the Pacific Ocean. I love the mountains. It's like this state, everyone wants to live in this state.
That's the problem.
Everyone wants to live in this state. We need to run this state better.
All right. We got to leave it there. Tom Steyer, candidate for governor, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
A note before we go, you're going to be able to find all these interviews for governor in our podcast feed in the coming weeks. You can also watch them on the KQED News YouTube channel. We're going to be posting a lot more content there this year in general. That is a wrap for Thursday, March 12th. Political Breakdown's a production of KQED.
Our engineer today is Christopher Beal. Our producer is Izzy Bloom. Our video team includes Alex Tran, Matt Morales, and Vivian Morales. I'm Scott Shafer.
And I'm Marisa Lagos. We'll see you next time.